Hi, I'm Lou Maxon, client of Tom Kundig and owner of a Olson Kundig home, and you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. In May of 1950, a young man attended a lecture by Frank Lloyd Wright in Raleigh, North Carolina. Today, George talks with that man, architect Truman Newberry, now in his 90s. And later on, music with singer-songwriter Julianna Raye. And now, your host, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Hey, thanks, Tom. The great architect Frank Lloyd Wright died 65 years ago this year. He was brilliant, opinionated, controversial, admired, hated, the whole spectrum of celebrity. He was the greatest architect of his generation, and he would not hesitate to tell you. In the late 1950s, instead of retiring, he was flying high with the commission of the Guggenheim Museum in New York and a host of other projects. One night, I dreamed that Frank Lloyd Wright found himself in the Oval Office of the White House in 1958. Except instead of President Eisenhower, the renowned architect was greeted by a time-traveling, tall, orange-hued former president with a swirl of gravity-defying hair.
Where's my audience? I want my audience, my applause. Frankie. Can I call you Frankie? Welcome to my White House. I'm Donald Trump, the 45th president. Unless there's more election fraud, I'll be the 47th president too. I've gone back in time because apparently all the architects in America are Democrats, and I need your genius for a huge renovation project. It's this White House. The place is a total dump, a shithole, and I need you to make it great again.
Mr. Trump, this stately and honorable space exhibits truth against ornament most admirably. I fail to need to transform it into something else.
It's so sad, really. Crooked Hillary, Barack Hussein, Sleepy Joe, they had no taste. Where's the gold, the marble, the giant roof with my name and huge letters on it? I want the most luxurious White House in the history of White Houses. Giant windows, golden toilets, and a few craps tables in the East Wing. Oh, and the press room, much, much smaller.
Sir, as you must know, I'm the finest architect in the world, and my designs achieve greatness through simplicity and embrace of the natural form. What you are asking for is a travesty.
Oh, okay, Frankie, Lloydie, Bjarke, whatever your name is. You're fired.
Thank you. I'll not have you Babylonian glory hounds sully American tradition with atrocious taste. Now, if you want a new Trump library, however, I'm your man.
And as the time-space continuum hurled Trump back through the vortex to 2024, I woke up. With apologies even to Donald Trump and Frank Lloyd Wright for those horrible impersonations. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by June Goldfinger and Jeff Taylor, sponsors of Circle Square Triangle, a traveling exhibition on the architecture of Myron Goldfinger, and by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Architect Truman Newberry moved to Raleigh, North Carolina when he was a teenager and studied architecture at North Carolina State University's School of Design, graduating in 1956. During his career, he worked with a slew of Raleigh area architects, including W.L. Baumgarten, Colin Jones, Carter Williams, and Leif Vallon, the architect of Cameron Village. He partnered with fellow NCSU alum Sam Ashford before establishing his own firm. Truman designed many houses around Raleigh, including his own 1963 home on Candlewood Drive. While he was in high school, Truman went to a lecture by Frank Lloyd Wright, held in the then-new Reynolds Coliseum on the campus of North Carolina State University, which had just started an architecture program 2 years earlier. Wright held the audience of 5,000 enthralled. Given that Raleigh only had about 75,000 residents in 1950, it was one of the largest architecture talks in the country. Here's George's conversation with Truman Newberry, recorded earlier this year.
On the U.S. Modernist and NC Modernist websites, you'll see photos of the Catalano House, North Carolina's second most famous house after Biltmore. Finished in 1954, it became instantly popular and published all over the world in different magazines. And today I have with us an eyewitness to the Catalano House, Truman Newberry. Hi, Truman.
Hi, George.
So you were there. Tell me what you saw and how you were involved with the house.
Well, I was involved in the house in the role of an observer.
Yeah.
Didn't have any other physical connection to it, but knew Catalano, and he was my fifth-year professor.
Oh, okay.
So I already knew him before he became my professor, in that I would go out to the site of the construction of his house. I was interested in the hyperbolic paraboloid roof design that he had developed for it, and I wanted to see how it was being constructed. And so I would go out there periodically. I went out when they had just started the foundation, and of course
you were a fan, yeah.
And so I would go out periodically, as the construction progressed, while the foundation and the supporting walls. But then the construction of the roof, when it started, I went out more frequently because it was, it's a hard way to say it, it was progressing slowly but speedily.
Yeah.
Speedily, I'm sorry. I made more frequent trips out there when the actual roof itself was being constructed.
Did you know from the very beginning, before you started visiting, that it was going to be this hyperbolic paraboloid shape? Did you know that in advance?
Yes, and I knew it in advance. I don't recall how I knew it in advance.
Maybe he talked about it in your classes?
I think, I didn't have him as a professor until my fifth year, which was 56.
So after the house was built, then you had him as professor.
Right. But I knew him. I mean, he was the head of the architectural department, and so he was always around, I guess is the best way to put it.
Sure, at NC State, right.
No, I wasn't in his classes, but I mean, he was in the School of Design. And then, of course, in my fifth year, he was my professor. We spent a lot of time together. For obvious reasons. I mean, I was in his class, and he brought several visiting, I started to say professors, but engineers and architects.
The house was built by Frank Walzer, who was very well known in Raleigh for doing most of the work of the modernist architects. I guess you ran into him a lot when you visited the site.
I met him out at the site. He was very welcoming. He never said, hey, you guys get out of here. And
right.
that was before the days of the government requiring hard hats and other things on construction sites. So
yeah,
so we didn't,
no safety regulations. Just anybody come on board.
And we would keep a safe distance away from the actual construction, and we didn't really inject ourselves into the site, even though there might not be construction going on, because we just didn't want to outlast our welcome.
Right.
We respected very carefully the construction site.
How long did construction last about?
I'm not sure. It's been so long ago. The roof itself was slow going because it was made up of so many small pieces. The best my mind can remember, probably a year.
Okay. Well, that's pretty good, Truman. I mean, this was 1954, so we're asking you to go way back.
But it was so unusual, at least to me, that I wanted to spend a lot of time out there and watch how it was put together. And as a matter of fact, after graduation, I built a model of the house, and I generated the curve of the paraboloid. Dick Bell and I spent a lot of time working on projects together. I designed his original office.
Mm-hmm. What happened to the model?
It went away.
The house was finished in 1954. Did you get to attend anything involving, the opening of the first couple of months? As a student, I would expect that would be big news at the College of Design.
I don't recall that there was anything special that we as students were invited to. I think there were some open houses.
Faculty things, maybe?
Or dedication.
Okay.
Probably faculty and friends. When he was my professor, we did go out as his students.
And have classes there, right?
Not in a formal sense, but there were just a couple of trips that we went out and a couple of brief classes. And each time a very nice tour of the house because it was progressing even from 54 to 56. Those couple of years, there was still some, I would say, fine-tuning that was going on there. So he would always take us out for the most recent update. He was very generous in opening it up to us.
This house really affected you as an architect. I know that after Catalano moved, it was for sale several times. Did you ever think of buying it and moving in?
I was too poor.
Okay.
No, seriously, I wasn't in the market. And, of course, in 1963, I had designed the house on Candlewood Drive for myself.
Okay. And you're still there, right?
No. My first wife and I separated.
Okay.
And so she and my 3 kids stayed there. They finished growing up, I should say, in the house. And then my ex-wife, Shirley, she stayed there after the kids were grown and had left home. And Harris Wells is there now.
Yes, yes.
And I've been really pleased that he has done a lot of things that I was not financially able to do myself. One thing that he did, the original design, I couldn't afford a carport or garage. And he called me the other day about if I knew where a water line was at the house. So he and I, still stay in touch. But I was out there one day and we were talking about carport garage and the old brown paper bag story that we've heard about drawings being done on and then built just from that basic.
I think the napkin stories.
Or the napkin, but in this case, I think it was a paper bag. But I sketched out, it's not a pure carport nor a pure garage. It has a closed-in area and some open area, reflecting a lot of the character of the main house. And it's separate from the house.
Okay.
The site, it's on a fairly steep site, and it just was not workable to have it connected to the house. So he built it just like the sketch. And the front of the house is on NC Modernist.
Yes.
But it doesn't show the garage.
Outside of residences, Truman, what are some projects that you worked on during your career that people might be able to drive by and see?
Well, it's no longer there, Dick Bell's office building, but...
The Water Garden.
Right.
What else?
Capitol Towers, housing for the elderly.
Capitol Towers, that's on Six Forks Road?
Right, it's a 12-story housing for elderly. Cedar Hill North apartments that were converted to condos.
Okay.
I did plans for the Mormon Church on Six Forks Road.
So that was your design there, that Mormon church?
Right. Now, the Mormons, they have, I think, the best architectural, acoustical engineering ability of anyone in the world.
Well, certainly they're large.
The Tabernacles,
for
example. And they have a lot of prototypes. And when I did the plans on the Six Forks Church, they were completing one church a day somewhere in the world. And they had prototypes that they would associate with local architects.
Yes.
For adapt and do whatever.
Was that the case here? They gave you a prototype to work from?
Yes.
Okay.
And we made some fairly significant changes, but we did, adapt it.
I understand you've recently been working on one of Raleigh's institutions, new char grills, hamburger places that have been around now for, 50, 60 years?
Yes.
Very famous. Where are these new char grills going to go up?
Well, one was completed about 4 years ago in Wake Forest.
Okay.
And there's going to be another one in Wake Forest, maybe one in Roseville.
The classic one on Hillsborough Street, I understand, got destroyed.
I believe that is correct. The one, I did not do the plans on, but the one that's on Strickland Road if I'm not mistaken, I think the roof design that's on that was basically like the one on Hillsborough Street.
Okay.
My first 5 years, having become an architect, was spent with Carter Williams.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And I did a number of significant buildings with Carter. The State Archives Library building.
Oh, that's a beautiful building.
The original.
The original building.
Not the vault building, I think, was added to the site. But I basically designed and did the plans.
Now, that building, as I recall, had this really beautiful search room with a 2-story sort of atrium in it that they have since gotten rid of. But it was really gorgeous.
I worked for Carter Williams, but I did the design and the plans on that. I also was the project architect. He literally put it in my lap. Reynolds Coliseum down in East Carolina.
East Carolina. He's very well known for that one.
And that is a complex. It's not just a basketball arena. It has a natatorium, swimming pool with 8 lanes and a diving well, handball courts, offices, classrooms.
Right.
It has been renovated. The original building, the cost was unbelievable by today's standards, but I understand that the renovation was many millions of dollars. But anyway, I was real proud of that. And Charlie and I were in the same class, School of Design.
Yes.
And he was also my structural professor. While we were classmates, I was also a student of his.
Okay.
So it kind of
How did that work?
He wore 2 hats. So, well, his exams, even though he and I were classmates, I didn't get any favors from him in the classroom, his classroom. But
I'm confused. How was he the professor and the student at the same time?
Well, he was a professor and a registered engineer, so most of his non-design academic
so he was older than you.
Curriculum, yeah. Not much, but a little.
So he had already gone to engineering school.
Right. Well, he was an registered engineer. He was a structural engineer professor. And so he had all of this background to his credit academically. So he didn't have that many other requirements.
Okay.
Curriculum-wise.
Okay.
So he had a lot of, I won't say spare time, but he had a lot of time for other than pure School of Design curriculum.
Truman, I'm fascinated to know that you're probably one of the last people alive that attended Frank Lloyd Wright's lecture in what was then the new Reynolds Coliseum in Raleigh NC State, and you were just in high school. What was that night like?
Very interesting in that Frank Lloyd Wright was always well known for his ego.
Yeah.
And I was in high school, and my advisors knew that I wanted to be an architect, so they kept track of a lot of things going on, and they learned that Frank Lloyd Wright would be giving a talk.
And this was May of 1950.
Right. I was a senior in high school, and so I decided that was the thing for me to do, to go hear Frank Lloyd Wright. I didn't know what an architect was, really, but I was learning very rapidly with the help of my advisors, et cetera. Plus, I was working for Leaf Vallon as an office boy and babysitter.
Right, right.
But anyway, Frank Lloyd Wright was talking about a lot of things that I didn't understand because, I'm a high school student and haven't been exposed to that much information relative to architecture. I knew I wanted to be one, but it was well attended, as I recall.
Oh, yes.
A number of students there.
Thousands of people when Raleigh was very small.
And there were several of us. I had 2 classmates that wanted to be architects. They, in fact, the 3 of us did end up being architects.
Now, I've always heard that night that Frank Lloyd Wright got up on the podium and said something like, "I am so glad to be here in Columbia, South Carolina." Is that true?
I remember there was some controversial statement that he made, but I do remember all of the School of Design students, as far as I know, were there, and then several of us, from local high schools that were going to be going to the School of Design. And one of the School of Design students asked a question. I do not remember what it was, but whatever it was, Frank Lloyd Wright, he didn't appreciate that particular question.
And so what did he do?
So he was ready to leave. I mean, I think that was his cue to leave, I guess. But
the story I've always heard is that Henry Camp Hefner introduced Wright. Wright got up and talked for about 10 minutes and then sat down. And then Camp Hefner, who, was embarrassed, kept lobbing questions at Wright, and the students would lob questions at Wright until the end of the hour or so. Is that how it happened?
That matches pretty well with what I remember. So there was a lot of ego there, to me anyway. I mean, of course, I'm just a non-architectural student, but I could still detect that ego.
Right. So how was the overall reception for him? Did people walk away from that inspired that evening?
I think so. I mean, he was small in stature, but with that big ego, I mean, he was so well known. I think most or all of the people that were there really appreciated the fact that they were able to be there to hear him and see him.
My understanding was at that time, Raleigh's population was something around 70,000 people, and there were about 6,000 or 7,000 people that showed up for the lecture, which would have made it one of the largest lectures of its era.
Right. It was a large crowd. In fact, I felt fortunate to be able to get in to hear him.
At that time, NC State had a number of luminaries come through. Richard Neutra was through during that period. Maybe Buckminster Fuller was there as well. Who are some of the people that you remember meeting during those days?
Those two that you mentioned, Buckminster Fuller, he would come and be there for weeks at a time. I worked on a lot of geodesic domes. In fact, he came and the Marine Corps flew a geodesic dome that had been built in Fitzgibbon's backyard.
Jim Fitzgibbon, yeah.
I was one of the students that helped pick it up and carry it out into the field so the Marine Corps helicopter could pick it up. That was the Marine Corps challenged Fuller to develop a very mobile structure to be used for a number of different purposes during war.
You can see some of this information at ncmodernist.org/domes or at ncmodernist.org/Fitzgibbon.
Mies van der Rohe that we mentioned a little bit earlier, I was in George Matsumoto's class, and Mies and about a dozen of us that George put together met in George's house.
On Runnymede Road here in Raleigh.
On Runnymede. There were about a dozen of us. And Mies, he was there in his classic form of the cigar in one hand and the martini glass in the other.
Of course, yeah.
And so the photographs of you see him with the cigar and the martini glass was exactly the way he was. So we met at George's house for a couple of hours, so we were able to spend that time in a small group with Mies, which I thought was, that was a real blessing.
What a heyday that was to be studying architecture at that time with all those people.
I think that I was one of the few privileged that 5 years I was there. Charles Ames was there. There were several others I'm drawing a blank on, but they were all international architects and engineers and designers. And, of course, Charles Ames was just absolutely fascinating. And one thing that he told us that I've never heard or seen in any of his bios, but in one of our small groups, someone asked him how he got into the kinds of things that he was designing and working with. And he said he started out with Disney doing cartoons. And he said he just was not going to sit and do one cartoon after another.
All day long, right.
All day long to make the animation in the cartoon.
And back then this was done manually on cells that they would make the paint, essentially the images on there. and then be able to flip through those with a camera to shoot the actual animation.
Right.
Which today is all done by computer.
Right. And of course, he's designed hundreds of chairs.
And many films. He went on to do a number of films as well.
And one that was really fascinating to me, well, they all are, but model trains.
Huh.
And where I saw that was not when he came to the School of Design. I'm not even sure that it had been made at that point, but Museum of Modern Art. That was a film being shown there, the model trains. And I said, hey, Charles Ames, I met him. So really, that was a unique period at the School of Design.
Other than your projects, what are some of the buildings around the Triangle that you like?
Dorton Arena, of course.
Dorton Arena, okay.
And Matthew Nowicki, I believe that pronunciation, Nowicki. The original design sketch that he did on that at one time was in the School of Design library.
Yes.
I don't know where it is now.
Maybe it's with that model somewhere of yours.
And I built a model of Dorton Arena, by the way, too.
And where's that model?
Oh, it's long gone.
It disappeared?
Long gone. Well, we're talking about 70 years ago.
Right.
And so I was 90 2 weeks ago. So all of those years and all that stuff that I worked on in those years and the models, and we built a lot of models.
Have you been to the Jim Hunt Library that Snowhetta did?
No, I haven't been there. It's state.
Yeah.
I have not. What I've seen of it, though, it's just a fantastic facility.
You should visit.
So one of these days, if I can get my walking in a little better shape, we'll certainly do that.
You can see Eduardo Catalano's house at usmodernist.org/Catalano, and you can read all about Truman Newberry at ncmodernist.org/Newberry. Thank you, Truman.
Thank you, George, for this opportunity.
Singer-songwriter Julianna Raye has been a professional musician for more than 30 years. Her first album, Something Peculiar, was voted one of NPR's top albums in 1992. And since then, she's toured and opened for Don Henley and Rufus Wainwright. Her 2009 release, Dominoes, was nominated for an Independent Music Award, and her latest project is titled Hush. Welcome, Julianna.
Thanks for having me.
Julianna, before we talk about music, you've been teaching mindfulness and meditation for a long time, and you co-founded Unified Mindfulness. In fact, you routinely practice mindfulness and silence as a part of your work. All I know about mindfulness is How to Eat a Raisin that I learned by Jon Kabat-Zinn, which was like the first 15 minutes of a week-long course that I dropped out of. So enlighten us a little bit about meditation.
Well, I just love that reference. Actually, I got into meditation to survive the insanity of the music business. And then it became the centerpiece of my life along the way. And I had to acknowledge to myself that the one true thing I could count on in my life was mindfulness practice to get me through all the ups and downs, to actually get me through the downs and actually help me deepen my fulfillment from the ups. So what's important to know about mindfulness in a nutshell is that it's attentional skill development. You're developing your attention in particular ways. In Unified Mindfulness, we're very precise about the ways that you're developing your attention so you understand the practice of mindfulness. I think a lot of times people do exactly what you do. They say, so it's about eating a raisin, huh? What is that? But when you understand that you're developing your attention as you eat a raisin or as you walk along the city street or as you do anything you do, you have the potential to develop your attention in such a way that you can reduce your suffering, increase your fulfillment, and be more effective in your action. When you understand that, then mindfulness starts to get interesting. And for me, it was a lifesaver. I was struggling with severe anxiety and depression, and I was in this crazy up and down music business. And I sort of thought, oh, I'll do this one retreat and I'll be fine, and then I'll be able to pursue my music. And instead, it turned into a lifelong journey. And at a certain point, I just had to see that truly mindfulness was the center of my life. And so that's when I shifted my focus. So I would say I have two vocations. One is music. That was kind of the earlier part of my journey. And now mindfulness is my main second vocation.
Well, for me, I certainly do feel better when I eat a raisin, so I don't know why that happened. But that was my 15-minute tutorial.
You could say that you're developing concentration, your ability to focus on the raisin. You notice details about the raisin that you wouldn't ordinarily notice.
Yes.
And of course, this is applicable to architecture too. What's it like when you go into a beautiful home that really grabs your attention and moves you?
Oh,
You're
she's good.
taken
Oh,
by...
segue.
Yes, right?
Nicely done.
Oh, baby.
You're taken by the subtle details that you might ordinarily overlook when you're looking at that structure. You're appreciating the wisdom, you could say, in the architectural structure. And you may have a sense when you encounter brilliance in the architecture scene, you may have a sense of perfection, or you may have a sense of just appreciating the intrinsic beauty of nature as manifest through an architect's eye and vision. So we could take that back to these mindfulness skills and say, concentration is the ability to focus on what you choose. When you enter an architectural space that moves you, you are taken over by that experience. You're absorbed in the activity of appreciating the architecture. And we could say that's an absorptive kind of concentration, the ability to focus on it. You're not distracted by thoughts of your day or thoughts of work or whatever. All that drops away. We could say you're deeply absorbed.
Like your mind gets hijacked.
That's right. You're in a beautiful way, in a way that is healing for you and you know, enlivening and enriching for you. And same thing, sensory clarity is the ability to detect details in your experience, whether it's a raisin or a Frank Lloyd Wright home. Those subtle details, we call that sensory clarity. And then equanimity is what I described earlier, that sense of perfection or intrinsic beauty or okayness with the world. And the reality is that we have our sort of milieus that we're drawn to, whether it's architecture or music, that we lean on to produce those types of effects. But another way to think about it is that it's all about your attention, and you can purposely develop your attention systematically so you have those types of effects that we get from architecture or music in more and more aspects of our life. And that's the journey of mindfulness training.
Note to self, must have Julianna back on show. This is pretty fantastic. Pretty fantastic. I'll have what she's having, Tom.
Okay. More raisins?
Yes. Well, this next song is the title track from Julianna's warm and captivating album, Dominoes. Every time I hear it, I'm transported to... Well, Tom, can you transport me?
Well, here, try this.
I'm in a charming French cafe. Not in Paris, let's say in Toulouse. That's where they build the Airbus planes.
Are you working in the factory?
I'm outside the factory.
Oh, sorry.
In a cafe. Come on. It's 5 p.m. in December, just a few days before Christmas. Julianna's song is playing. I'm sitting outside on a sturdy but not comfortable wicker chair, sipping an espresso, and I look over and there are French actresses Sophie Marceau and Ludivine Sagnier laughing together over glasses of Burgundy as the sun sets over the nearby cathedral. As they leave, Sophie briefly touches the gray scarf that's shielding me from the cold and compliments how nice it looks. At least it seems like a compliment. I don't speak French, but whatever she said sounded really nice. Such a peaceful feeling being in the right place at the right time. So here's Julianna bringing us that feeling with Dominoes.
He calls at noon, says meet me there at 3. I have nowhere else to be, so play, I feel inspired. But when this game began, my heart had bigger plans. Like a row of dominoes, just one touch and down we go. Penthouse suite with champagne views, minds deliciously confused. Little black dress on the floor, do not disturb card on the door. Sounds of love from rooms below, like a row of dominoes. The train's on time, but I'm a million miles away. I try to practice how I'll say goodbye. I watch the numbers rise on the elevator ride. Like a row of dominoes, with his touch all reason goes. One by one the zippers teeth gracefully admit defeat. Little black dress on the floor, do not disturb card on the door. Sounds of love from rooms below, like a row of dominoes.
You know, if the pizza people ever adopted that song, their sales would go through the roof.
Maybe for a certain audience.
Right. I think pizza was the farthest thing from my mind listening to that song. It's very languid and sexy.
Languid. Yes. What a nice vocabulary word for today.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Julianna, like most performers, you had to duck out during COVID, but I understand you got COVID through some pretty unusual circumstances.
Wow, you've done your research.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in a monastery in Japan.
Oh.
I arrived there to do an intensive Zen training. In America, we think of Zen as just sort of aesthetically simplified, and we think of relaxation as Zen. But the training itself originated from the warrior class, and at least in Japan, and it's very grueling. It's kind of a boot camp style training, and actually very alive. We tend to think of like monks sitting silently, perfectly still, but there's a vitality to Zen training that people in America don't tend to be aware of. So anyway, I went to this monastery that is known as one of the 3 most brutal monasteries in all of Japan. It's called a devil monastery. And I was there to train, to experience that. And I arrived, and unfortunately, the head monk had been exposed to COVID, and we had tea, and he came down with COVID, and then a few days later, the rest, a few of us, I think half of us, because it was a very small group, came down with COVID, myself included. So
That's brutal.
I was sequestered. Yeah, it was no heat in the monastery. So, it was, that being said, they served me delicious food, and my COVID symptoms were relatively light. My dad had actually passed away of COVID a few years earlier. And I had managed not to, I was caretaking him at the time, but I managed not to catch it from him. This was just at the very beginning of the pandemic. So it was an enforced time of healing and reflection in a kind of an unexpected way and in very unusual circumstances.
Did you complete the training, or did you have to ring the bell like the Navy SEALs do and wash yourself out?
Well, so this is a monastery. It was rebuilt in the 1600s. It had been in a fire and was rebuilt in this. So it was like that old. And, I don't know if either of you have this sense of when you travel, you want to feel like you're in somewhere foreign, but oftentimes you'll see a Starbucks or, whatever, a McDonald's, and it'll kind of pull you out of the experience. So being in this setting, I felt like I was in somewhere completely unknown to me. I felt like I was in another century. And that was extraordinary. And in the monastic setting, the villagers bring them food. That's how they live. They live on the donations. So they had delicious, is in the countryside, they had delicious fresh vegetables, and they'd make these wonderful soups, and they'd bring them to me to take care of me. So I was, cold, but I had layers, and I was being cared for every day.
Was this one of those monasteries that it's built into the side of a cliff? We see the photos of. I guess a lot of those are in.
Or even like the guru up on the cave.
Yeah, you see really interesting architecture of the monastery itself.
Actually, I realized I didn't quite answer your question. The retreat was canceled, and then we had like a 3-day one. It was supposed to be 7 days. We had 3-day one afterwards, which I completed, so I got to experience it. But the environment, it's just these ancient monasteries. If you've ever visited Japan, there are these wonderful buildings with these giant wooden beams and these, what are the roofs made of?
Tile?
Yeah, roof. There's like metal tiles it's a really, and everything has these gargoyles, and it's really quite stunning. So it was surreal, especially in the kitchen area or the dining area. There were these giant vats for, usually back in the day, there would be like 40 monks. There were 6 at this point. Okay. Just gives you a window into how Japan is transitioning away from this style of training. But anyway, these giant vats where the food was cooked, built into the ground. It was really quite an amazing experience. I've never been in a setting like that in my life. It was really wonderful. I have had experiences in other monasteries when I've traveled in Japan, but I never got to stay there. And one day I was shaving one of the monks' heads. They shave their heads once a month, so I was there. I got to shave a monk's head, and I got to be. I always felt like a guest, but I got to be on the inside in a way that usually you don't get to as a guest. Yeah,
that's a pretty personal experience. Yeah, shaving a head.
It was.
Now, you have a new album, Hush. And it's where this next song is coming out. It's called Hummingbirds and Harbor Lights.
Hummingbirds and harbor lights, hunting tiny seashells. Through the stories they tell, you come back to life. Fire opal, burning hummingbirds and harbor lights, hunting tiny seashells. Through the stories they tell, you come back to life.
Julianna, that was lovely, and people can find your music at juliannaraye.com. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.
Julianna is so awesome. Wow. Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by June Goldfinger and Jeff Taylor, sponsors of Circle, Square, Triangle, a traveling exhibition on the architecture of Myron Goldfinger, and by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs. Mr. Guile, please do the honors.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 20,200 significant modernist houses, and access 4.3 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with Kelly Policelli on guest research. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guile. George and I will be back soon with another Back to the Future edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.